Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack. Hello, everyone. So after winning the Australian Open in 2021, Naomi Osaka withdrew from the French Open just a few months later. Osaka expressed a need to deal with her mental issues and desire to ditch the Open's press conferences. Oh, but the backlash ensued, baby, resulting in her exit from the tournament altogether. It is mandatory for professional athletes to talk to the media. Not only is it mandatory for professional athletes to talk to the press after hard-fought battles on their respective fields, but in some cases, not talking to the press can garner heavy financial consequences for these athletes. Let's not forget Seattle Seahawks running back Marshawn Lynch's answer to every reporter during a press conference: "I'm just here so I won't get fined." Do athletes owe us more than play? Or should they just shut up and dribble when it comes to the press? Please welcome mental health therapist Veranda Bellamy. Hi, Veranda.
Hello.
Sports and entertainment reporter at Nightcast Media and Sirius XM host Nick Hamilton. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Tammi. How you doing?
Good. Social media influencer and former defensive back at North Carolina A&T, Andrew Drew Comments Bullock is with us. Hi, Drew Comments.
How you doing, Tammi? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I still want to start with the question that I usually start with, even though we're speaking about professional athletes. Why should Black people care if professional athletes speak with the media or not? Why should they care, Rhonda?
Wow, that's a great question. We should care because really it's a question that is so involved in so much of everything that we do, right? For so long, we've looked at athletes just going out, doing what they do, playing the sports that we love, that we all love, the American sports that we all love. They go out on a field, they get banged up, right? They get hit, they get bruises, they get concussions, they get, all types of incidents, and sometimes life-altering things happen to them. And they're expected to not say anything about it, just leave the field, and that's it, right? It's hush hush. So it's important that we hear from them. It's important that we actually, if they don't want to say anything, that's great. That's on them. But it's important that we do know exactly what's happening to them inside of the field when they're getting injured, how it's affecting them, how it's affecting their homes, what's really going on within their minds, because there's a deep thing that happens from my experience in working with athletes. Their mindsets are really being impacted by what's happening on the field. It's their mind that actually keeps them in the game. It's very important.
All right, we're going to circle back to that because I got a question about that. Drew, so why should Black people care whether athletes talk to the press or not?
Well, I think that's a great question. There's a couple of things you got to consider. Number one, Black athletes in these platforms, we represent the culture. That's one. We are promoting our culture. We are promoting it's in us. And so I think that's one of the reasons why people will care what comes out of our mouth. But also there's so much more to Black athletics than just the athletics, just in the X's and O's on the field, but also the things that surround our experience, particularly in this country, the United States of America, or even in this world, where we as Black people have a specific set of experiences that we can use or we can speak to when we are propped up on these particular platforms. So that's one of the reasons why I think that people will care what comes out of our mouth. I think it's just another question entirely whether or not the athletes should have to do it. But there is definitely a reason why we care, and those are definitely relevant reasons.
Nick, why should we care?
Well, I think we should care, and kind of backpack off of what Drew said. You have to look at how the narratives are being painted about our athletes, whether they're positive or negative, and see where those narratives are coming from. I think when you have these athletes that are on these major platforms, whether it be Black-owned platforms or just general owned platforms, you have to learn who they are, what they're going through, and therefore to be able to understand what's going on and not to always be so emotionally charged when it comes to a lot of these news media outlets painting a particular narrative in a negative way, like you mentioned earlier about Naomi Osaka. So I think it's very imperative that Black people should care, and also who's asking these questions. Are they people from the culture asking the other Black athletes these questions about the culture, not just about their athleticism. And I think also you get a broader perspective as far as how they think, what issues pertain to them that are important, and they may be important to us as well. And so when you have somebody like maybe a LeBron James or a Steph Curry or somebody of that magnitude speaking on issues that concern our community and our world, then it brings more heightened awareness to what's going on beyond the football field, the basketball court, the hockey rink, or the baseball field.
I think we're more talking about the obligation that an athlete has after a game, and whatever game that may be, tennis, soccer, basketball, baseball. There's an obligation through that particular organization, the NFL, the NBA, the Tennis Association. There is an obligation that those athletes speak with the media directly after performing, in the midst of their heightened emotions, whether it's at a loss of a game or a win of a game. And as a journalist myself, I have to say, it's always best to get someone when they're in the middle of their emotions, because that is the ticket. That's the juice. That's the meat right there. That's the clip you want. You want them when they're mad, you want them when they're at their happiest, either or. But should they be obligated to do that? Because it does bring about the concern of mental issues and mental health, to be honest. So should they be obligated to do that in that way? Not in a sense of, I'm having an interview with Oprah Winfrey, so I'm LeBron James going to sit down with Oprah. Not in a sense of Naomi Osaka is going to have a conversation with Wendy Williams, but more so, I just finished my game. I still got sweat on my brow, and now I have to sit down and tell you how I feel and why I missed those 3 3-pointers. Nick?
Yeah, absolutely, because that's part of our job. I mean, how else are we going to disseminate that proper information about the game or about the athlete if we don't get a chance to speak to them, like you said, and capture that moment? And also, too, this is what they signed up for. When you sign your contract, when you're part of these players associations, they tell you up front, listen, you have a committed opportunity to talk to the press for so many minutes. That's why they even tell us in the press there's a cooling off period sometimes between the end of the game and the moment they walk into the press room, or pre-COVID, we were able to go to the locker rooms. And so you're able to kind of build that rapport with the athlete and also be able to show that and showcase that athlete after the game, what they went through, what like you said, missing the 3-pointers or missing the field goal at the end of the game, or actually throwing a winning touchdown pass. People are engaged, and the more you're engaged with the athlete, and we're able to do that as media members, or else we don't have a job.
You got a good point. If there's nobody to interview, then we don't have a job. But Drew, should they be obligated? Nick says, look, you know what you're getting into when you sign that contract. You already know that you are going to have to speak to the media. You sign the dotted line. But the question is, should they have to, Drew?
Well, I would say that I'm going to disagree with Nick on this one. No, they should not have to be obligated to speak to the media, because the broader question is, how fruitful are these questions, right? You get the same questions. Typically, you're going to get a bunch of rehearsed answers. We went out there, we prayed hard, everybody was dialed in, played hard, everybody was dialed in. We had a great week of practice. We were able to execute, or we didn't execute, or, we just got to make sure film, get back to it. It's the exact same recycled answers. And so we are listening to maybe 5, 6, 7 minutes of just meaningless quotes that really don't have any kind of significance. I like when the athletes are able to make the decision for themselves, or I like that they should be able to do that, because you have athletes who, number one, actually have something of substance to say and contribute rather than those cookie-cutter answers. But also are comfortable in front of media. A lot of athletes, and I'll bring up Ricky Williams to be an example, may have certain uncomfortable moments or certain situations where maybe communicating in front of people is not their strong point. Everybody's not like me. I like to hit people to get them off the field on third down, but also put a camera and a microphone in front of my face. I love it, but every person is not like that. Communicative abilities vary from athlete to athlete. Some people love to speak, some people don't. And so when someone is unquestioned or someone is uncomfortable in that particular situation, you get those either cookie cutter answers, or you get those distracting mannerisms like, after every single word or phrase. And it gets very distracting. It's like, what am I really getting from this? When you were looking at, even in that moment of heated, and those adrenaline is still pumping in your blood, you still have those endorphins in your brain. You are liable if you ask the wrong question. And to Nick's point, I will agree with you on this. are the people asking the questions do they look like us? Are they asking anything that actually is pertinent? Because if they ask me something stupid, I'm probably going to look at it and go, look, man, I have to now focus between this primal urge that I'm going through because of this athletic competition I just went through, and now having to put on my professionalism and code switching facade just for the sake of this interview. And so I think that, we really got to look and see, like, what are we really gaining from this if an athlete is not actively making the choice to be in an environment where they are comfortable in to actually give us either sound bites or information
I can say that is pertinent to us. You have those cookie cutter answers down pat, my brother. I don't know how you had them all ready to roll like that. Veranda, should they be obligated? Or better yet, look, why? Why are?
Yeah, so obligated is a very strong word. Okay, so obligated means that it's something that's required, like you have to do this, right? And so with that being said, you're expecting, or the field is the media is expecting these players to come off of a field emotionally charged with responses. And yeah, it drives emotions, it drives performance, it drives, all these feelings and thrills from us watching to the reporters and all of that across the board. But there's also trauma on the backside of that, right? So these people still have to go home and be with their families. They still have to go home and process that. And what if there's a loss that came from whatever happened on the field, or whether they're on the courts, whatever the game is that they're playing, they still have to process that. And then there may be another game that's going to come behind that, maybe the next day, right? And so then there's this obligation for them to go in front of the media, in front of millions of people, to express what really just happened in a way and be able to articulate it in a way that's going to be attractive to everyone that's around with a mic in front of them to respond. No, I don't think the obligation should be there for them. I think it should be an option for them if they are in a space to speak in a way that's going to, I like to say, do what serves you positively.
Hold that thought, Veranda, because I'm obligated for a commercial break right now. We'll be back on Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on FOXSOUL. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and the business of being Black today is, should athletes be forced to speak to the media? Please welcome mental health therapist Veranda Bellamy, sports and entertainment reporter at Nightcast Media and Sirius XM host Nick Hamilton, social media influencer and former defensive back at North Carolina A&T, Andrew Drew Comments Bullock. So, Veranda, I was talking to you before we left, but let's get back to you. Listen, at the top of the show, I mentioned Naomi Osaka bowing out of the Open because of mental issues and not wanting to speak to the press. Should athletes ever be granted exemption when it comes to talking to the press?
Absolutely. And here's why. Because they face so much pressure to perform. Sports is a mindset thing, right? It's all about your mind, how you think. What you think you do, that's it. If you think you can, you do it. That's the mindset of sports. That's the mindset of living, of being, essentially. That's cognitive behavioral therapy, right? It's thought and then behavior. And so if a person is on a field in whatever the sport capacity is, and they're not performing at their best, and they choose to bow out gracefully and say, look, I cannot handle this interview, I choose not to. Respectfully, we should be able to say, okay, I respect that. Because we don't know if that person is on the brink of, on the other side of that, if they were to say yes, is a suicide attempt, is an outburst, is a mental breakdown. We don't know what's on the other side of that. So we have to be in a position to respect someone's judgment and be able to support them and ask them, how can I really support you in what's on whatever it is that they're giving us, whatever their response is, how can I support you better? I actually believe that any athlete should be going through ongoing mental health assessments monthly to make sure their mind is performing at its best.
I can certainly agree with that. Nick, should there be exceptions?
Listen, if I'm on the street and I see an athlete and they don't want to talk to me, we're not in the professional setting, I totally understand that. But when you're in a professional setting, again, there are always extreme circumstances and there are exceptions to every rule. Obviously, if there's a death in the family, or like what Naomi Osaka went through as far as the mental aspect, okay, fine, but that's not an everyday occurrence. There are a lot of these athletes that just get up and walk away. Just the same thing that happened on Wednesday night when the Lakers lost to the Pacers and Russell Westbrook was benched in the latter part of the fourth quarter. He didn't stay for a post-game presser. He got up and left, never came to the press room. And so it's things like that that make you say, well, damn, we wanted to get an opportunity to see what Russell was going through. What was he feeling? Because he was benched in the fourth quarter of a crucial game, and they end up losing that game. People want to know what's going on through your mindset. People want to know what's happening. We have a job to do. So if we continue to just let stuff like that slide, then how long are we going to have a job, and how long are we going to be able to be important enough to put these stories out there that people want to know about? So we're always, just like the athletes are competing on the court and on the field, we're competing in the media world to try to get the story and bring out the best story possible. But we can't get that story. We have nobody to talk to.
Maybe you should meet Russell in the bathroom and get that story.
I'm good. I'm good.
Drew, how do you feel? Should there be exceptions?
There absolutely should be exemptions. We've got to take into consideration. You have exemptions in the court of law. I can plead the Fifth Amendment in the court of law between a jury and a judge when my freedom is on the line. I should be able to do that when we're talking about a presser after an athletic competition. So I absolutely agree. Again, it comes back to the point of what are we gaining from hearing a bunch of cookie cutter answers? What is the level of substance of the questions being asked, and what is the capacity of the athlete in order to answer them? I see NBA athletes being asked about their vaccination status and why they're not vaccinated or vaccinated, and I have people spreading misinformation from a platform when they don't even know the first thing about biology. I'm not looking to Bradley Beal for my medical advice. I don't. Okay, don't tell me that why are people getting COVID? No, don't do that. We have to really get back to what are we gaining from this? Coaches, assistant coaches, GMs, they should be obligated, no question about it. But I think for athletes, like I said, if I can get out of it in the court of law, I should be able to get out of it by pleading the Fifth. I could be able to do the same thing.
I got to give him that one. I totally got to give him that one now, Nick. If I can plead the Fifth in the court of law, certainly I can plead the Fifth and be like, I ain't trying to do this press conference right now. I'm mad. I just lost.
Yeah, well, you can be mad and you just lost, but be mad at yourself. But also I have to agree with Drew, too. It's about the questions that are being asked. You have 1,100 people asking the same questions about vaccination status, about your shoe size and all this other nonsense. It's about what questions are being going forth. If you're asking questions and specific questions, because, yeah, there are a lot of cookie cutter answers, but it's also about how you ask certain questions to get around some of those cookie cutter answers, because you get a lot of good sound bites depending on how you've asked questions. So I think that also has to rely on the responsibility of the media reporter that's asking the question to get around that, so that their readers or their audience can learn something maybe a tad bit different, or get that soundbite that we need to get those clicks.
Well, the soundbite heard around the world at a press conference came from Marshawn Lynch, aka Beast Mode, once famously went through a press conference answering every question with the same answer: I'm only here so I won't get fined. How about if every athlete did that one, made that move now? How about it?
I'd be with it. I'd actually be with it. I'll speak to that. That's fine. If you want to put me in that position, you're going to force me. If I have to be obligated, you're going to get the same thing. Either I'm just here so I won't get fined, or you know why I'm here. My favorite was when Marshawn Lynch was saying, "Thank you for asking." For every question they ask me, I appreciate you asking. Thank you for asking. So, hey, look, we can play that game too. And matter of fact, that ended up being a very good thing for his brand as well. I would like to see him continue to market that as well. So maybe if we can be put in a position like that, then let's do it. But again, you're gonna force me. You're gonna get these hands verbally.
Yeah, he's got Subway commercials now. That served him well.
Yeah, it worked for Marshawn Lynch, but it's not going to work for every athlete. Not only that, don't get mad. An athlete can't get mad at what a reporter writes if you don't give them the opportunity, when you get the opportunity, rather, to speak your piece. So don't get mad at the reporter. Don't get mad at us when we write certain things from our perspective because we asked you the question. Don't get mad at that. And also, too, it's about marketing. It's about marketing of the particular league that you're in. That's one of the reasons why athletes are required to speak to the media, because it's also about marketing marketing and it's about advertising. And I guarantee you, when you sitting at a press conference and they're signed by Body Armor or they're signed by Nike or Adidas, they got something Nike, Adidas, or Body Armor at that table to make sure they represent. Nobody has a problem with that, but everybody wants to have a problem when it's time to fess up if you messed up or if you did something that you weren't supposed to do and have to talk about it.
Wow.
That's the contradiction.
Yeah, and I'm with you when you say, hey, look, I'm totally with you when you say you want to speak so that your point of view gets into the story. But I do have to say some journalists don't quite get it right all the time either. So sometimes it's best to just shut up. Veranda, after losing a game, athletes often feel dejected. Is it mentally unhealthy to be put in a position where you have to answer tough questions from the media while you're in a bad mental space?
Absolutely. That goes back to the whole, cognitive behavioral therapy response that I gave. It's thoughts and behaviors, right? And so when a person is in an unstable place mentally, it's to put that pressure on them to perform when they're already unstable. It's just added pressure. It's just a recipe for disaster, really, is what it is. And so to force them into this corner to respond when they don't have the capacity to do so it's traumatic for them. So they go home and they have to process this with their families. They find a way. Sometimes, working out is helpful. They, talk to their coaches. They talk to the other team players, things of that nature. That's a healthy way. They talk to a therapist, whoever's on their support team. But sometimes people just don't know how to do that, or pride won't allow them to. And so that's why I said before, we have to be in a position to be able to trust what the players are saying. If they cannot articulate what it is that they feel, then we have to really be in a position to support that. How would you feel? Like if that was you and you were in a position where you really could not respond, you didn't know how to, you just felt overwhelmed.
Yeah. It's kind of like when you did that dance one time for your mama and she thought it was cute. Now she's forcing you to do it every time family comes over. Go on, do that little dance for our Auntie Betty. Go on now. Okay, I'm going to go on now to a commercial break. We'll be back on the Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Fox Soul. Go on, do that dance now. Go on, do it. Welcome back to the Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Fox Soul. The Business of Being Black today. Should professional athletes be obligated to speak to the media? Now let's circle back to Naomi Osaka, who said she had some mental issues, and those were a part of the reasons why she didn't want to talk to the press. And she got a lot of backlash for that. And a lot of that backlash stemmed from being a weak athlete or a weak person or someone who can't handle this business. Is it something of old where people are saying if you can't handle a fire, get out of the kitchen. If you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen. But shouldn't we come up with new ways to help people in their mental stability versus saying, hey, this is how we used to do it. This is how it's been done. And if you don't do it this way, you're weak and you're soft and you shouldn't be playing in the first place. Drew?
I think that I love when that argument gets raised up. But I again, to the specifics of, let's just put ourselves in that position before we start throwing stones. For instance, like if I told Nick, hey, Nick, your editor said your byline was terrible. You can't use semicolons worth of daggone, and you broke your ID badge. How you feel about it today? He's probably not going to want to talk to me about that. It's probably going to be absolutely annoying. No one's asking the person who works in the bank. So your spreadsheet was complete failure. How do you feel? Like it's not really that good. So I would say that there are certain things that come along, and obligations that come on with being an athlete. Getting up before the sun gets up to make sure you work out, watching film, preparation, hydration, nutrition, that sort of thing. I still think, though, because of where the athlete is doing, is that what good are you giving to the public? When you're communicating, I should be gaining something from that as a public person. If you have nothing to contribute, then it's a waste of time and I can move on about my day. Again, we should give these athletes exemptions, GMs, coaches, whomever, executives, they should be obligated. But no, don't put it on the athlete. No.
Nick?
Well, I'm gonna to Drew's comment. Yeah, you could talk to me about anything. I'll answer. I have no problem walking away from it. But I do understand your point as far as there needs to be some sort of discretion. And I get that. I never had a problem with Naomi Osaka walking away from that particular situation because she explained it. She said, "Look, I'm simply going through some mental trauma, some mental issues. I need to step away." It's not like she's never talked to the press ever. It's not like she's always avoided the press. And so at that point, I never had a problem with it. I think it's an archaic way of thinking when you criticize these athletes in that particular way, saying that they're weak or they're not up to par as far as being in that spotlight, because again, there's a lot going on in that spotlight. Yes, they have to be mentally sound and mentally strong to be in that particular position, but they're human just like we are. And so understandably, there are times where, yeah, okay, it's okay to step away, but not when it's all the time, or it's over 50% of the time where you don't want to talk to the media because you simply mad because you sucked and you don't want to talk about it. No, you're not getting a pass for that, especially for me.
Veranda, another thing they did with Naomi Osaka was they pulled back footage and they pulled back pictures. She had just done a spread for one of the magazines. And a lot of the comments on social media was like, oh, so you were mentally stable enough to handle this spread, but you're not mentally capable enough to play ball. So I want to ask you, as a mental therapist, is it possible that you could function perfectly normal and fine and at your highest level when you're doing something that you love and something that you've trained and something that falls in line with what you do as a profession, and still have mental issues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are people that walk around here depressed. You have family members, friends that are depressed. They look completely normal. They laugh. And it's not until they withdraw that you're like, oh, maybe you're depressed, right? So yes, it's completely normal for people to perform at their highest, and still have a mental condition that's taking place behind the scenes. And that comes with the territory. I don't know any one person that's ever not gone through anything. None of us has never not dealt with some type of mental inconsistency. We all have been there in our lives at some point, no matter what we do, where we come from, what our walk of life is. And so I think it's inhuman to say that you haven't. And so she's no different than anyone else. And yet still, we all have jobs that we carry out, right? And we show up and we perform, and we have bad days as well, just like she did. And so she was smart enough. I think it's actually a sign of strength for her to say and be able to say in that moment on a national and international actually platform to say, I can't do this interview. When she knew, and surely she had thought of what the backlash is going to be from media and what everyone was going to say, she had to muster up the strength to say that, knowing what people were going to say and what the response was going to be. She didn't care. And so when I heard that, I was like, yes, finally, someone is actually taking that stance. I was so proud of her. But it's definitely normal for people to show up. You'll see them one day in one capacity, and then it could be a week later and you're like, what is going on? Like it happens that way. It's just how the mind works. Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally got confused because people were saying, oh, you were smiling and happy and shooting this photo shoot. How are you all of a sudden mental? It's almost like people still don't understand what mental illness and mental issues are. Surely I can take a full photo shoot and smile and cheer and jump up and down and still be depressed and have some issues that are going on in my mind as well. So I never understood why they compared or pulled things, pictures of when she was smiling and compared them to the day that she thought, I can't do this anymore. Nick, you are a member of the media and you interview players. Do you care if your players want to be interviewed or not? Do you want to interview a player that doesn't want to be interviewed? Look, I interview people all the time, and a lot of them, like, and I interview entertainers who it is their job to be interviewed, right? And some come in and that day they just don't want to be interviewed. And I have learned to say, well, thank you for coming in, Nick Hamilton. Appreciate you. Much success on what you're doing. And we'll see you later. Thank you for stopping by. Like, I have mastered when they don't want to be there and how to get them out. So how do you feel when a player doesn't want to be interviewed?
I mean, whether it be I interview players and entertainers like you as well. So it's kind of the same principle. I mean, you have to kind of feel it out, realize if they don't want to be interviewed, if it's something that's really, really pressing, like something broke that week, that this is your first time getting an opportunity to ask them. And I may simplify it. I may just ask you one question instead of 3 or 4, just to kind of get you out of there. But I also say this too, people have to understand, as far as you were referencing, Tammi, the Naomi Osaka photo shoot that people were looking at. A lot of times we hold on to stuff for months. We don't know when that photo shoot was actually taken. That could have been held for a certain time period where the editor says, look, we'll hold on to this. It's evergreen. We'll keep this, or this video was evergreen, so we'll hold on to this. And then when something happens, a movie comes out or a new TV series, or, the Super Bowl is coming, we'll drop this interview then. So we don't know when the timing is. And then also, too, oftentimes Black athletes get criticized way more than their Caucasian counterparts. Yeah, and that's something that has to be looked at upon as well, because both their Caucasian counterparts, Black athletes, Latino athletes, whoever, are all going through something similar as far as mental situations, but they're not given the same grace sometimes as the others are given. And like I said, it's about discretion. Yes, do I believe that the athletes will be required to talk to the media? Absolutely. But also, too, let's think logically for a second. If they're going through something mentally, then you have to say, hey, maybe I get them on the next go round, especially if they're always talking to the media, or simplify it and say, hey, I'm gonna ask one question instead of 3 or 4 and get them out of there so they can go on about the rest of their day.
Yeah, absolutely. Drew, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I definitely want to comment on that. I would say this. I think a lot of times, you understand, certain people dictate your mood too. Let's not act like, I'm probably a lot more happy to see photographers with the lights taking my picture than I am to see the same old reporters asking me about what color socks I wore and why. I think one of the issues that Naomi's dealing with wasn't like the actual thing.
Hold on, Drew. It's questions like that go viral and that yield answers that people have been waiting for all of their life from that particular person. It's like when Barbara Walters asked, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Let's take a break, because I'm that kind of host that sends you to commercial breaks right now on The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Fox Soul. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. Please welcome mental health therapist Veranda Bellamy to the show, sports and entertainment reporter at Nightcast Media, and Sirius XM host Nick Hamilton, social media influencer and former defensive back at North Carolina A&T State University, Andrew Drew Comments Bullock. We are talking about the business of being Black today. Should professional athletes be obligated to speak to the media? And I think it's interesting that Drew brought up the comment that, I don't want to be bothered today with what color socks do I have on. The stupid questions. Serena Williams made mention of the stupid questions that she gets asked over and over in her press conference interviews, specifically, she was speaking of those, I think. And Drew, you were talking about, I don't want to answer if I got black socks or not. But Nick, you said there are some people want to be asked about their socks. They do want to be asked about their socks.
Yeah, I mean, whether it be socks or something significant like that, but I have to agree with Serena Williams. And a lot of times, too, some of these reporters that don't necessarily look like us like to antagonize and try to pull a quote or get clickbait out of some of these athletes. And then it annoys them to a point where somebody like Drew or myself gets to the point to ask a question. They're finished. They're done. They don't even want to be bothered. So we get grouped in that same category. We don't get the opportunities to ask the real questions that need to be asked because of some imbecile beforehand wanted to get clickbait and wanted to piss off the athlete. So I think, again, as we said, and as Drew said, it's all about what questions you're going to ask, what purpose you're going to ask those questions, and then moving forward, and then also building that relationship with the athlete. I think time and time again, we as Black journalists and Black-owned media outlets don't get the opportunities to build those rapport. So that's the moment that we're able to build those rapport with those athletes. And sometimes I've even had athletes come up to me and say, man, I appreciate that question, man. And because they've been bombarded with such idiotic nonsense, it's a breath of fresh air when somebody like myself or others, ask a decent question that's going to be relevant to moving to the story that they want to put out there.
I have to ask you, Nick, are these sports rooms, are they diversified?
Not as much as they should. Not as much as they should. And there's a lot going on, Tammy, behind the scenes. And I won't get too in depth with that because you only have an hour show and we'll be on here for 3 days. But I mean, when you look at this, the opportunity that Black-owned media and other, Latino-owned media and outlets like that don't get the same opportunities as the majors get, that's a problem, because then we don't get a chance to get called upon. We don't get chances to really express ourselves the way that we want to express ourselves. I mean, I remember a point where everybody was asking LeBron all these basketball questions, but hey, I want to ask LeBron about when he recently purchased the Boston Red Sox. And since he's such a big baseball fan, obviously being a Ken Griffey fan, what did it mean for the Negro Leagues records to be now instituted into Major League Baseball? And he gave me a great answer. It was like he had a sense of relief that somebody was asking him something completely different than what went on during the 4 quarters of a Lakers game. And so when we get opportunities to ask those type of questions, or whether we're asking NFL coaches, hey, what, especially the white coaches, hey, what do we have to do to bring on more opportunities for Black coaches and coordinators to get opportunities where we don't have just one Black NFL head coach, as we currently said? Those are the type of questions that we want to be able to put out there, because we have an audience that wants to know this. It's like you have an audience, Tammy.
I always thought that you were relegated to asking questions about the game and not jumping outside of those parameters.
I mean, you can. I mean, and oftentimes we do have to ask those questions about the game because we're doing a story about the game. But then also, too, there are other stories that come about during the week. Like I said, the lack of Black coaches in the NFL, the lack of Black coaches in the WNBA.
But is that
things
the
like that
time to talk about that after a game?
You know what? To be honest with you, that may be the only time we have to get that opportunity. We have to get in where you fit in.
Listen, Veranda, most of the time when these athletes are being interviewed, you really want to we love seeing the winner because they're all happy, joy. But most of the time we want to get the loser's perspective. What happened out there? Those cookie cutter questions and answers that Drew talked about earlier. What happened out there? What was on your mind? So does it affect a person mentally to have to relive their mistakes? No. I mean, very shortly after that moment, or at all?
It does. So there's a thing called post-traumatic stress disorder. You may have heard about that before. PTSD. Mm-hmm. So often people, I guess, look at that as just, or relate it to just someone that's been in a war before or a veteran. But it's just not relevant to veterans. Anyone that's dealt with any type of trauma. Trauma is anything that is outside of your norm that kind of disrupts your normal way of living, right? So if you're in a game and someone just kind of comes in and hits you upside the head, right? That's traumatic for you. And your helmet, whatever, as dramatic as it could be, that could be traumatizing for a player. And so you come back in, someone's wanting to ask you questions and you're having to relive it over again. And again, it could be 2 weeks later, someone else is coming back to ask you about it again. That is traumatizing for a person. And so with trauma, what happens with it, your body remembers what happens in that event. And so when you're traumatized, when you are placed back in a situation similar to or what feels like that experience, your body responds in that same way. We call that a trauma response. Even though it's not that situation, your body thinks you're back in that situation and you respond according to what happened when you were traumatized. Mm-hmm. And so it's traumatizing when players have to relive over and over and over again these traumatic and sometimes embarrassing situations for them. So to answer the question is yes, it is traumatizing for them, and it's
what made me think of that question is Chris Webber, I believe it was, had the most I would say traumatic and biggest mistake in I think college history. And if we remember anybody's mistake, it's the Chris Webber mistake. So do you think it to relive, for Chris Webber to have to relive that over and over again, is that something that should happen when you're in sports?
It shouldn't, and that's why I really do believe that players should have to go through mental assessments often, monthly. And I believe that until they pass that assessment according to a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whoever's evaluating them, their questions should be diverted to their coach. So if there's a question about a situation or a play or an incident, then the coach should be responsible for answering that question, not the player.
That's exactly what Drew said. But Drew, what do you say about that Chris Webber timeout mistake back in the 1900s?
I would say that you got to take into consideration the amount of emotion that goes into playing these sports. Like in that moment in time, Chris Webber was pushing himself not only to his physical and mental limits, but also his emotional limits as well. One of the things we say about playing defense in football, I'll just make the comparison here, is that it's more than about X's and O's. It's about, you have to have passion. There is a lot of emotion in that. And then when you come up short in that situation, it is very, very, it is traumatic. You do feel it. And so when somebody actually didn't relive it, it definitely will elicit that same response. I'm so glad that was mentioned. Like, it's almost like me saying, hey, look, your girlfriend of 2 years just left you just because she said she thinks you broke now. How do you feel? Now you have to keep reliving this thing over and over again. Don't force me to do that. I understand what comes into being a professional, but he was a college student. So it's not even a professional. Yeah. It's just a college kid. So I think that, that's the issue that we're dealing with, right? That's the tightrope that we're dealing with. We want you to somehow balance your emotions at the highest peak with this level of professionalism. I think that's a tall order. I think sometimes it may be a little much.
It is a tall order, isn't it, Nick? I mean, just me talking about it, I don't know that Chris Webber could even watch this show right now.
I think Chris is okay by now. I think his bank account has kind of helped him over the course of time. But also,
that's the mistake we make. We assume that people's bank account affect their emotional stability.
Well, I'll say this much: I'm not so much at the time that it happened, but look what he did. He turned a negative to a positive. He created a foundation called Time Out. He had a book talking about it. So he was able to talk about it in his own way, in his own time, in his own words. Even when you look at, what happened with Nick Saban after the Alabama lost against Georgia.
Hold that thought. I got to take a time out. We'll be right back on the Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Fox Soul. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack on Fox Soul. Please welcome Veranda Bellamy to the show. Nick Hamilton is on the show today, and Andrew Drew Comments Bullock is on the show today. We are talking about the business of being Black, and the business of being Black today: should professional athletes be obligated to speak to the press, to the media? Listen, one of the biggest and most famous duos when it comes to athlete and journalism love is Muhammad Ali and Howard Cosell. Yes, we can all agree with that. Howard Cosell, the first journalist to actually respect the fact that Cassius Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali and began to refer to him as Muhammad Ali. So do athletes need the media in order to be successful in their sport? Because Howard Cosell made Muhammad Ali a little bit, didn't he, Nick?
Yeah, he did a little bit, and Ali was smart to utilize the services of Howard Cosell, much like how we saw Ahmad Rashad with Michael Jordan. That was Michael Jordan's pretty much insider. For Kobe Bryant, I believe it was Jim Gray. So you have athletes at different points in times, even LeBron James at the time with Rachel Nichols. So you had athletes utilizing the media, but now I think in this social media age, a lot of athletes are taking to social media, whether it be through the Players Tribune or whether it be their own social media handles, to get out their information the way they want to get it out. But also, too, they can only go so far, because guess what? We still have to tell a story, and we can tell a story that can be told from various perspectives, and you can only have so many characters to tell what you need to say. So I think
ultimately, the point of social media, really, is the media necessary with social media? Are we even relevant?
Yeah, we are. I mean, like you mentioned during the break, I mean, Twitter is the most up-to-date source of getting news right then and there. And a lot of us where we have sources, whether we have inside information, we can hurry up and put it on Twitter in about 3 seconds and everybody get it before you see what's going on television. So I think we're still relevant. We just have to do it in different ways to disseminate that information to our audiences.
Yeah. Do you think, what do you think about that Howard Cosell, Muhammad Ali relationship, Drew?
I think that there's a two-part or it's a two-pronged relationship as for an athlete to be successful. One is on the field or on the court. The other one is off of it and building your brand off of it. The media aspect of it is certainly extremely important off of or away from the respective sports. So I would definitely agree with that. On the field, on the court, that's a completely different situation altogether. You need to make sure your X's and O's are tight and you're doing what you need to do. I do think that if a player is smart, well, I don't want to say smart, but more focused on building that brand, getting their name and getting that platform option, because at some point, the sport has to come to an end. What will you do after that? And how do you launch yourself? I think one of the best ways to have a relationship by choice with a member of the press. And then I think that's is very beneficial.
Yeah. Veranda, you have a podcast, Be Inspired, and your book, The Pain Stops Today. And you just told me a little secret that you're launching Happyology today. So which would you like to share with us?
Oh, Happyology. It's all about happiness, guys. So we're coming out of, I call it pandemics of sorts. We have I call it a racial pandemic, right? That we're still kind of ebbing and flowing through. And then we are coming out of COVID-19. We're still kind of dealing with that too. So Happyology is all about us kind of reconnecting to our happiness. And the slogan is really simple: be happy because you can. And so we're launching it today. I'm so excited and proud of it.
Excellent. What's one thing I need to do to be happy?
Choose it.
Okay. Choose it. All right. I choose it.
Yeah. Just choose it. So often we feel like it's something that's way outside of us that we just can't access. And we oftentimes stay in toxic relationships. We choose our mindset. We don't realize.
Yeah. So we're choosing a lot of things. Why not choose happiness? Got it. Drew, your YouTube channel, talk about
it. Yes, my YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, wherever they let me put a video up. So I will regularly post content just about things that people can relate to, whether it's dating, relationships. Lately, though, it's been debunking misinformation and disinformation. That is actually big business happening right now as far as disinformation and misinforming the public. And so what I'll do, whether it's politics, and lately it's been science communication, making sure that we get the appropriate and correct information about how effective and useful vaccines are, as well as the truth about this virus that is going around our planet right now that poses a great threat to folks. And so I'll regularly post content there, just explaining the very technical terms, put it into layman's terms, spoken, understand it, throw some humor in there as well, and make it entertaining. So not only are you learning about science, but you bopping your head to it and want to play it back. So that's what my endeavor is right now.
That's pretty deep. Where do you get your information from?
So my information actually comes from a number of medical journals, New England Journal of Medicine, the British Medical Journal, Lancet. I go to nature.com to get papers as well, but I also collaborate and work alongside of virologists, immunologists, epidemiologists, most of them Black, not all of them, but most of them Black as well. And what we do is we have regular conversations, discussions on Clubhouse, as a matter of fact, about these things. And I'm constantly learning and evolving and making sure that I get good information out to folks so we know the truth.
That is excellent. Loving what you're doing. Nick, I need to know about your Nightcast Media and what you're doing over there, but also make sure you let the people know where they can, when they can catch you on Sirius XM. But let's talk about Nightcast Media.
Well, Nightcast Media continues to grow the platform. We're developing more shows to be able to give people an opportunity to discuss various topics, whether it be politics, whether it be entertainment, sports, commentary, basically mostly from a person of color perspective. Because we want to be able to showcase in those various genres, even on the tech field. So we want to continue to put those up. Nightcastmedia.com, your gateway to sports, pop culture, community, tech, and entertainment all rolled into one. And then you can catch me every Tuesday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern, Sirius XM Slam Radio 145, TMA with Nick Hamilton. We talking all things sports and a lot of things that the normal radio shows don't want to talk about, but we ain't scared. We gonna hit you head on. We gonna come hot off the presses like a fresh cup of coffee.
We were talking about points of views today. Do Black sports fans have a different point of view and perspective than white sports fans?
I think so, just from a cultural standpoint. I think when you go into the barbershops or the beauty shops where there's women talking about sports or where there's men in the barbershops talking about sports, they want to talk about something that can relate to them. And not just about sports, but you can relate everyday life to sports, where sports is a microcosm. So if you can connect those two dots and put them together and make it entertaining, which we attempt to do, then I think definitely we got an opportunity to make our voices heard.
Well, Black folk definitely are entertaining. And you all have been quite entertaining and informational today, too. Nick, thank you so much for being on the show. Drew and Veranda, congratulations on your launch today of Happyology. That's it for me, The Business of Being Black. Stick around because Hollywood Unlocked is next. That's The Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack on Fox Soul. Peace. See y'all.